Dear all, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Domus Academy Disrupting Pattern Talks. So today we are pleased to meet a special guest, Matteo Ward, that it is one of the most innovative and disruptive stakeholders in the fashion system. Matteo works there with Abercrombie & Fitch, but the turning point is the 2015 when co-founded WRÅD, but it is one of the most innovative startups addicted to sustainable innovation to pursuing a social change. A long list of awards as the winner of the Best Retro Design Awards, finally said the Green Carpet Challenge Awards, and had taken Passo d'Oro in 2019. Today, Matteo is an active member of the fashion revolution, and for sure you know that it is the activism movement, mobilizing brands, policymakers, citizens through research, education, and advocacy to mainly promote the cultural industry change. If yesterday sustainability was mainly linked with the concept of regeneration, so root out a tree, plant a tree, today, and also thanks to Matteo's contribution, we redefine sustainability as the action compatible with human life, and so planet preservation. So environment, economy, equity, so social are the three pillars of this approach. Today, the industry supports sustainability mainly through circularity, establishing KPI as the durability, the availability, and the reusage, working on materials, and biomaterials are the answers. Working on the process and the carbon-free limits is the answer. Working with technology, the blockchain. But all these actions are able to increase the efficiency, not the efficacy of the sustainability. And because at the end of all these efforts, the main aim is to maintain the production and the distribution of clothes. And this is something that it is potential counterproductive. So sustainable products and processes are not enough. And the responsibility for change does not lie with the specific parts of the value chain. Is the entire product development system that should become sustainable. And today, this doesn't happen for the moment. Today, the mobile is based upon an industry that takes from the planet the resources in terms of water, air, and so on, and returns pollution and waste. And at the same time, take from the society the time and the expertise of the workers, and return health issues and dismiss clothes. Mainly 100 million tons of clothes is the result of what we can define as the paradox and the compromises of fashion. The paradox of clothes with a short life cycle, 6 months seasonality in the best case, and a production cycle of 4 years, considering from the forecasting agency to the shelf. And a never-ending after-use waste cycle. Think about 400 years for the dissolution of the microplastic. The compromises regard the tentatives to reduce the environment impacts and the workers' condition improvement is a compromise value, low value of the asset and lower in the case of the low leverage salary of the production site. Then we come to the high value for the brand in shop. But again, we jump in low value for consumer in terms of low care and loyalty versus fashion items. We have also some hidden compromises as the second hand, for instance, but in some cases becomes a way to hide landfill. Think about Ghana. The symmetry of fashion with 15 million of second-hand garments per week that arrive there, layers of runways. But the paradox and the compromises also combined with what we call social crisis. Because if clothes are born or dumped, we are destroying value and equity at the end. And this is caused by a sort of disconnection of people from the clothes equity. Today, people miss the love and the loyalty for the clothes. A disruptive solution so is necessary. An extended product life cycle is not enough. We need a stakeholder commitment to increase the consumer consciousness, and we need to reduce the demand. This is the way and the big challenge to afford today. And this is also the disruptive vision and scope of the project implemented by Matteo Ward. Designers have to inspire, need to be able to foraging and disseminate a responsible circular vision of fashion. Is it possible that the guilty fashion system becomes an active contributor to reduce the waste, for instance, of other industries? Yes, it is, transforming an issue in an opportunity with transversal upcycling. And this is the ratio of the first project of Matteo, the GPWDR project. The intuition has been really breakthrough, inspired by the fact that the ancient Romans used graphite to dye graphics. Today, graphite power, on the opposite, is a byproduct on the production processes of electrodes by tech companies for to the aerospace industries, and is wasted in a very large quantities. At the same time, graphite is not toxic. Give fabrics a unique shade of gray and a particularly soft tan. So from here, the idea to collect and convert graphite powder in a new sustainable raw material for fabrics and fibers, dye and printing. Another interesting project is PEAS. Take care that on average, an item of clothing is used 7 times. So this means that people is rigid and exhausted in its consumption. And this is excessive, and it is not compatible, and it must be countered. So PEAS, that stands for Product Environmental Accountability System, is a system that it is able to integrate social and environmental traceability of garments through the gamification. So it is a smart game to counteract overproduction and overconsumption. The attempt is mainly to promote and a real active contribution, bringing together the brands, the people, and the supplier upstream also to achieve a long-term sustainability goals. That means long-term use. The PEAS also technology make it easier to get information on the clothes origin and impact to make users aware of what is the initial environmental cost. This is the key of the concept of the project. And so what they were, how they amortize over time this initial cost. This could be done through the care, so love, and so the use. An innovative way to use this KPI to track waste and consciousness based on the interaction of people and clothes. The users mainly, then Matteo will give us more detail via smartphone, get a snapshot of how much the way they wear clothes can have a concrete positive impact on the clothes' environmental footprint. A life cycle assessment is able to calculate this impact and the impact of all the production steps. But more PEAS recognize also how long the t-shirt has been used for, providing updates on the dilution on its environmental cost and rewarding virtuous behaviors. So this makes consumers aware of the real value of the t-shirt, inspiring to use it for a long time. Matteo says we all have wardrobes full of problematic clothes. This is the archetype of the third project, the docu-series Junk Full Clothes. Here the objective is to generate a new awareness, break the wall and uncovers the negative impact of the textile industry, as in the famous Pistoletto work, The Venus of Rags, in where the beauty, the Venus, holds together the rags and the waste of the world. Junk shows really a dystopian world, highlighting the lies that are beyond the appearance. And with the naked storytelling regarding big production hubs, dumping grounds, is able in each episode to spot on a different issues that it is caused by fashion. And as the silence of the media, for instance, here spotting on the Akatama Desert in Chile, flooded with used clothes from Western markets. But are those clothes still there? How did they get there? Silence from the media. And the Ghana, the beach of Rex, the biggest importers of second-hand clothes. But what's the impact on the population? How many of these clothes are really in the condition to be reused? And where do those that are not end up? So again, the change is possible, and everybody have a role to play starting to get knowledge about it. So before giving the floor to Matteo, we fill our mouth with the Step Up Pro version 6 and 7.0, but are different way to name the level of the progress. But this is not innovation, because innovation is named disruption and means to focus not on the mission, but assess a new vision to change. So this is the approach we need to follow, and no other person, if not Matteo, could inspire you as to be a disruptor. The first action to change the perspective is to look beyond this perspective. So, Matteo, welcome.
I mean, thank you. This has probably been one of the most flattering and I have to say, specific introductions I've ever heard about WRÅD and what we do. So thank you.
It's a pleasure. Good inspiration from your actions, not just words.
I mean, yeah, I guess, first of all, you've done a lot of studying in our path. And it's always interesting to see listening to what's the perception of our work, what has work been so far from the other side, because you've touched on some of the biggest dilemmas that we're still trying to solve, because disruption and disruptive patterns is a big word, and I feel like we've never been able to get to that point, but each project is adds a little bit of perspective and adds a little piece to the big puzzle. So to introduce myself briefly, my journey into this field and trying to disrupt patterns started because I was part of the pattern that needs disrupting. You said it, Sarah, I was part of Abercrombie & Fitch, but it could be any other brand and company. I was literally a piece in the puzzle of this fashion system that is designed to produce more and more clothing that ultimately nobody needs in this quantity, in this low quality, and that is at the end of the day extracting resources that are essential for life, right? I was talking about this a couple minutes ago, actually, in a meeting. There's no difference between a piece of bread and the shirt I'm wearing. They all come from energy, land, water, air. It's just a way of remixing ingredients into another form. But a piece of bread is needed to feed 8 billion people on this planet. And we're actually unable to even do that. Whereas clothing in this quantity doesn't really feed anybody, except for a few. So this is one of the big dilemmas that I started to face early on in my career, a little late actually in my career. I was 27. And I don't want to say I had it all, but I was 27 and literally had a great salary, and I was traveling the world, and I was working, and I had a great career set ahead of me with this big American corporation, and part American, half Italian. So I was really enjoying a lot of the things that you would call success or progress, up until the moment I realized that was not success and that was not progress. The aha, or the wake up moment started, I guess, in 2010, 2011, when I was offered a job within the diversity and inclusion team for the company. Diversity and inclusion is a big word, like a big buzzword in the field of fashion today. And that, by the way, has nothing to do with our perception of diversity and inclusion. There's much more behind it. And I experienced it myself. And this is the first contradiction that I started to face in my career. How do you build an inclusive environment within one of the most exclusive environments, one of the most exclusive brands in the world. Our marketing was based on excluding people who didn't look like us. And at the same time, I was diversity and inclusion officers for all of our stores worldwide. So I was 26 and I started to cope with this friction, with this disconnection. How do you disrupt that pattern? First question I asked myself. Then 2013 came. And out of a tragedy, which was the collapse of Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, which killed 1,138 people, came both a deeper awareness of this disconnection, but also one of the answers that I was seeking in terms of inclusion. The death of 1,138 people in Bangladesh scared the heck out of me because I realized that I wasn't prepared for the job that I had. And I also never asked myself, who shall we deliver an inclusive environment to? Just our people in stores, and then is that enough? How did I miss the millions of people that create the stuff that actually gives us a salary in the first place? You're probably thinking, well, you're stupid if you didn't think about that. And you're right, I was. But it wasn't just me, it was everybody in the industry. And that's no excuse. It's just symptomatic of the level of gravity of the situation. I think when you start working in this industry, you walk into, some people call it a bubble, I call it a glass house, where you have, you walk into this maze of mirrors and you see reflections of yourself, and you're always looking for a better version of yourself. You can never get out of this very auto-referential system. And that's the fashion industry. And it took the death of 1,000 people to make me realize that there was a world outside this glass house that needed our most urgent attention. For me, looking myself into this glass house after Rana Plaza, I always say the fashion industry, the history of fashion, there's a pre-Rana Plaza and there's an after Rana Plaza. The after Rana Plaza was the moment when, you look at yourself in this mirror and you're like, okay, what I'm seeing is not in line with what I'm doing. I'm seeing a person, Matteo, who was raised and educated and came into this world with a desire to have a positive impact on people, who's doing a job, which in reality is forcing people into living in extraordinarily poor conditions, to the point where I was complicit in the death of thousands. How do you cope with that? How do you come to terms with that reality? I think the title of this panel is Disrupting Patterns, but the first step we all have to make to disrupt a pattern is to disrupt our path and have the courage to challenge our own comfort zone and exit the comfort zone and break the glass house and walk into this environment of unknown, which is scary, yes, which may cause anxiety, anger, sadness, and all of these things combined at the same time. I'm not going to say that I've been there and done that. I'm still there. I'm there every day. I wake up in the middle of the night with my eyes in tears, and I still can't cope. But I've learned to embrace this state of uncertainty, because it's the only space we have to evolve for progress. Being in the constant space where you want to challenge what you've done because you feel like it's never enough, it's never close to that definition of sustainability. It's a never-ending challenge, which it's like you studying for an exam for your entire life and you'll never get that perfect grade you're seeking. But at the same time, that's, I think, what we're called to do today. And if you are studying at the Domus Academy, you are also giving yourself the chance to have one of the strongest tools to drive that kind of change, which is fashion design. And why am I saying this? Because the world of fashion has the unique ability not only to provide clothing and to create art, yes, but also to inspire behaviors more than any other industry, maybe the musical industry, poetry. Like, we are in that field of action where people listen to what we design. Because we don't only design clothes, we design marketing campaigns, we design values, we design patterns specifically that move people in one way or the other. And it has always been like that. And the moment you realize that the way you design a collection can do more than what you can anticipate, it can go really, really, really down the road. It can do more for anyone around the world that you can imagine. Then I think you'll start feeling the responsibility in your shoulders, and that responsibility can hopefully drive the desire to use that tool for good. The best definition of sustainable design for me is the kind of design that inspires positive behavior. My personal journey, when I started to cope with that awareness, looking at my job and looking at, I asked myself, we have hundreds of people that queue in our stores every single day. I don't know if you've seen the store, Abercrombie Fitch store in Corso Matteo, Milan, in the heydays. Sarah, you probably have. We used to have 800 people in line every single day. Imagine if our stores started to inspire different types of behaviors than the ones that we had built our brand around before that. And therefore, when I decided to challenge myself and quit from Abercrombie, that became a priority. Using fashion design to inspire positive behaviors. How do you do that? It took a little bit of study, and I want to bring you and kind of give you the tools around which I'm still studying in order to hold myself accountable to that statement and make that statement reality through our job. First, you can't change what you can't see. So we're called upon a huge challenge. We have to build a sustainable, create sustainable fashion that is sustainable. How do you do that? Well, let's understand how fashion became unsustainable in the first place. Some of you may be thinking, or if I ask any one of you, you're probably thinking it was fast fashion. But what is fast fashion? You're probably thinking about some brand names, which we're not going to name. And the reality is that the fast fashion business model, which we all agree is unsustainable, is something that is rooted in the DNA of the birth of the fashion industry itself. 17th century, we're in France at the court of King Louis XIV. And King Louis XIV had a dilemma. He wanted to grow in wealth and power, and he wanted to become wealthier and more powerful than Spain and Portugal, the world leaders back then, after they discovered the New World. They were scratching their heads, probably. This is how I like to imagine the situation, trying to think about how to really do that. And who I consider to be the first CFO of the fashion industry, his name was Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He was the finance minister of King Louis XIV, came up with a great idea. He said, let's invest in the fashion industry. Let's create beauty at scale. In France, they were great at creating luxury textiles and silk and beautiful things. And their skills were just like up to perfection in terms of beauty, elegance, and extravagance as well, in terms of like design and style. They were really disrupting patterns back then. Let's imagine a world where everybody was wearing black and they were very constipated into their colors. That was Spain back then, but France had color. They had all these sort of beautiful patterns and ideas behind fashion. But they were lacking a piece in the puzzle: demand. Who was going to buy all of this clothing? Nobody needed all of this clothing, but they needed to induce demand in order to drive wealth. So they invented the concept of 2 seasons: spring, summer, and fall, winter. Guys, the actual system around which we design our collections, they are the ones that invented it around the table in order to induce us to buy more clothes that we actually don't need. And they made it an obligation of the Court of Versailles to change your wardrobe twice a year, or what you risk. You risk what everybody fears more than anything else, being laughed at, not being considered. The humiliation of not being up to the mode, à la mode, fashion, was a huge psychological driver, which actually determined what I called psychological structure obsolescence before we had technological structure obsolescence. And that was the first brick of the DNA of the fashion industry we know today. The second brick, which defines why the business model of fashion is unsustainable, is this desire to leverage on this invention of King Louis XIV to create more and more and more in quantity that we can actually sustain. And that happened a century later, 1792. We're not in France anymore. We're in England, and we're in the United States of America, where I'm actually in right now. There was a great politician back then called Alexander Hamilton. He was actually in line after George Washington to become the second president of the United States. He never made it to that point, but he left a lot of legacy, a lot of heritage in to many fields, and also the fashion industry today. Why? Because he went up to the US Congress, who was actually looking and trying to figure out, just as King Louis XIV was trying to figure out a century earlier, how to grow in wealth and power. And Alexander Hamilton said, well, let's invest in the fashion industry, in the textile industry, just like our cousins in England. And we should do so in a way that it's very profitable for the industry. In order to become very profitable, we have to exploit three things, he said: children, women, and water. He actually wrote these things down in a piece of legislation I actually, have a copy of in my office in Vicenza. And as you can see, he structured and normalized another aspect that we're still fighting today: the oppression of millions of people around the world. That is one of the rules or the secrets that allows this company, this industry, to be so profitable and to make trillions today. They were exploiting slaves imported from Africa back then, which is horrible. They were exploiting children. They were exploiting women. Today, we're exploiting people in Bangladesh, India, and Indonesia. The third brick, and the final one that explains the equation and what we're fighting, is this embedded in our DNA desire to overcome nature. And I'm looking beyond the screen because I have nature in front of me. And that started when we realized that in order to grow in wealth and power, cotton fields weren't enough anymore. We needed more than that. So we invented artificial fibers first and synthetic fibers after. And this happened in between the late 19th century and the mid of the 20th century. Without getting into a history of these fibers, because that would take another lecture. However, what I want to convey to you is that in the last 250 years, we pretty much changed the pattern around which the fashion industry was built for thousands of years before that. Just three decisions and three desires. One, making sure that people were buying more than they actually needed. Two, making sure that we are normalizing the oppression of people to make more and more clothing. And three, making sure that we're normalizing the idea that we can oppress the ecosystems and nature to make clothes. These are the three enemies. How do you fight them? And that's how you disrupt patterns. As Sarah said at the beginning, yeah, you can look at materials and you can look at new technologies, but if you think about it in a systemic way, finding a new material, a new technology to disrupt pattern can only go to a certain extent, because you're mitigating the ecological impact of the shirt I'm wearing. But this doesn't prevent the shirt from being made in conditions that are unethical to the people who create it, right? I can produce a shirt out of recycled fibers and still employ people who do not receive a living wage. So that's a no-no. Let's say I have ethical supply chain. Am I disrupting patterns? Not necessarily, unless we disrupt the business model. King Louis XIV made it sure to teach us that we can only grow if we induce demand. But overconsumption and overproduction are not limited by the kind of materials that we choose, nor by the kind of ethical supply chains that we build. Let's say you are creating a new collection that's made out of the best material in the world that allows you to reduce your carbon footprint, let's assume by 50%. And I'm the CEO of your company. And I say, let's use Sarah as an example. Sarah, congratulations, I love your new technology. I love it so much, Sarah, that I want you to double the production so that we can make double-digit sales on this collection that you've created using this technology by next season. So Sarah will be like, yeah, hey, I'm gonna design this beautiful collection and I have to increase it and double it up. What I just did is pretty much destroying Sarah's technology, because Sarah had built a technology that enabled her to reduce carbon footprint by 50%. But if the business model requires Sarah to double the production, well, minus 50 plus minus 50 equals 0. Her absolute impact on the environment is 0. So as with these 3 historical examples, I wanted to bring you in my brain, actually, because there's, I was invited here to speak about how we're disrupting patterns, and I'm telling you, I'm not disrupting patterns. I'm challenging every day myself and my team to disrupt patterns as much as I can. And I sometimes feel like this challenge that we feel like that we're never there is both something that we're proud of, and it's also our curse, because we are never content with what we've built, and it's a horrible feeling. It's like sometimes you create something, right? You've mentioned peas, you mentioned G-powder technology, you mentioned a lot of things, but this constant need to say, okay, well, this is not a milestone. This is just like a new starting point. How do we move on from there? Because we know that there's 3 big elephants in the rooms that we need to disrupt, and each and every single project that we've built in the past years, in my opinion, touch one or another chord, but all of them together, maybe they bring us closer to this, very, very aspirational title for this conversation, Disrupting Patterns. And I think Domus Academy, why do I go back? And even your logo, you have a D and a triangle, which are like elemental essential elements. I find inspiration, guys, in what I do, mostly from the works of interior designers of actual pieces of furniture, lamps, tables, chairs. I think we Italians and a few French and Germans have disrupted patterns the most in the 20th century, asking themselves the same questions that we're asking ourselves today with respect to their job as interior designers or architects. I'm thinking about Dieter Rams, Ettore Sozzas, Achille Castiglioni, De Lucchi, Joe Colombo, Victor Papanek. These are all designers, philosophers, Enzo Mari, who have, in one way or the other, informed the way we operate and think at WRÅD every day more than anyone else, I have to tell you. When I look at a lamp from Achille Castiglioni, I see perfection in a way that I don't find in any other object that permeates the textile industry. Why? Because it's a perfect synthesis of function, aesthetic, efficiency in the use of materials, and in a way, it's nothing crazy. it's just like putting together elements. He literally took a piece of car and an engine and a stick and tape and created a lamp called Toyo, which it's the perfect synthesis of what we need to build today. Things that work, that inspire and touch our heart, that build that emotional durability in a way that every time we use a piece of cloth, we are renovating pleasure, we're inspiring pleasure. One of my favorite definitions of ecology comes from De Lucchi, actually says, well, ecology is nothing more than being able to design something that inspires pleasure of use every single day, every single time. Now, I ask yourself, do you open your wardrobe and is there a garment that inspires pleasure of use to you every single day? There probably is. And if I had the chance to speak to you and start a dialogue, I will ask you, well, what kind of garments are those? Are they the garments that have the most technological fiber in them? Or are they the garments that you associate memories to it? Are they the garments that you have done something special with? Are they the garments that have been able to endure multiple challenges, adventures throughout your life? That you're because most of the times you're probably going to answer, yes, those are the garments that I consider the most special to me in my wardrobe. Those are the garments that are able to inspire pleasure of use every time we use them. And guess what? They're also the most sustainable, because they're probably designed in a way that can be repaired, or you're going to be in the mental space where you want to repair them if they break. They're also the garments that will probably be most adapted or designed to be transformed through time. And as you can see, when I'm speaking about the fashion industry in these terms, it's clear to me that the challenge we have goes beyond the intrinsic technical features of a garment. It's quite easy, to be honest with you, to design garments that are quote unquote sustainable. And I use quote unquote because there's nothing such as sustainable fashion. We can have fashion that mitigates the impact on the environment. We can have fashion that maximizes the impact on society. It's quite easy. I'll tell you. It's not so easy instead to design systems, both through communication and strategy, where these garments can renovate pleasure of use for the customer through time. That's our challenge. And that's where I'm trying to work. This is why we built Peace, through the help of Polytechnic of Milan and through the help of the Regione Lombardia. Because I was looking for a tool to inspire the pleasure of use through time that made it simple and pleasurable for people to do so. And that's why we also created Junk, the docuseries, because I was looking for a tool to inspire love and to help us see how much there can be behind a t-shirt that brands usually don't want us to see. And how these sort of patterns that we've built in the past 250 years are still affecting negatively millions of people around the world. A few words about Junk, because it's the latest project that we've done. And then I'll quiet myself because I think I'm going beyond time. So Sarah, please signal to me when I'm speaking too much.
You have 4 minutes.
Oh, yes. Okay. So 4 minutes are enough for Junk. So Junk came to life because we, as a team, and Will and Sky Television and the extraordinary talented team of directors and director of photography, which we worked with, felt that we needed to speak about the issue of sustainable fashion in another way, leveraging precisely on what makes fashion non-sustainable today, which is those 3 bricks that I explained at the beginning. So we needed to have an approach that was based on emotions, on politics, on culture, on society, rather than on material innovation or circularity or recycling or blah, 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 blah. Those are not solutions. Those are tools that can contribute to finding the solution. But the solution sits on two words: social justice. If we don't have social justice, ecological compromise is inevitable. And this is what junk shows. In each and every single country, from Chile to Ghana to Indonesia to Bangladesh to India and Italy, it's clear that there are several ecological issues. And the most intuitive thing to say is, well, if there's an issue with waste, for example, in Ghana, let's put recycling plants in Ghana to help them recycle that waste. No. Then as you go on in each episode, you realize that can just put a Band-Aid on a wound that's getting larger and larger every single day. The problem lies in the fact that people are not treated right. There is still a lot of social injustice in the way we treat those same humans that create, use, and live thanks to the fashion industry every single day. And if these humans are not put in the economic and psychological state to care for more than their survival, they will have to compromise on the environment in order to actually feed themselves and their families at the end of the day. This is what it's clear out of every single episode that we have shot from junk. In Bangladesh, they tell me, we have filters in our factory. And then I look around the factories in Bangladesh and you see these waters that are pitch black coming out of the factories, and the smell is gross. It's just, the ecosystem is destroyed. I'm like, well, if you have filters, why don't you turn them on? And they're like, we can't afford it. You guys looking at me, who I'm the manifesto of Western abuse of power, white, Caucasian, worked in the fashion industry, is like, well, you guys want to have t-shirts that cost no more than $1.60 so that you can sell them at $10 and make a huge profit out of it. If you don't pay me enough, I don't have money to turn on the filters, but I still need to produce for you. Otherwise, I don't survive. There's no alternative industry. And it's the same story on repeat in every country. So if you're asking yourself where to start to disrupt patterns, I would tell you, look back at those 3 bricks. Business model, King Louis XIV. Oppression of people, Alexander Hamilton, and England and the United States of America. This overcoming desire to succeed and be faster and better than nature, which is unnatural. It's actually rooted in 2,000 years of philosophy and history. These are the 3 bricks we need to work around with in order to find a path to really make clothing more sustainable. It's not about understanding how to design a piece of cloth that mitigates the impact on the environment. It's all about redesigning the role of fashion in the 21st century. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matteo. So thank you very
Sarah.
much. It's always a pleasure to hear the news and your point of view. And now the questions. Comfortable questions for you. Yes, Q&A time. So I look at the chat if somebody wants to put some question, but taking the first that you quote about the business model, what do you think about the fact that some brands now migrate versus the made-to-order business model? What do you think about that?
It's a very good path to go. It's probably the best path. It's very hard to structure from a logistics standpoint nowadays. So that's a huge challenge. But if the question is what I think about made to order, it's tailor-made. It's like you are designing when people ask you and tell you that they need something. So you limit and reduce waste, you limit and reduce the risks associated with overproduction and forecasting, which is,
amazing.
A non-perfect science. And therefore, it's the business model that we should actually have in order to meet the essential needs of people around the world. Is it pure utopia considering the economic system which we live in today? Yes. So I think it's a start, but by itself, it won't survive. It's not from an economic standpoint, it won't be able to sustain itself unless it's part of a bigger change and really redefines the rules of growth, the actual definition of growth for the fashion industry.
So what could you suggest to our Domus students and the 61 attendees for this talk, how they can contribute to the change you're pursuing?
Not to be thrown back by the, sorry, puppies, not to be thrown back by the more the size of the challenge. There's no perfect solution, and made to order, upcycling, working to create supply chains where living wages are paid to people, are all positive contributions. So whether you're building your own small brand, that's what you need to focus on today. If you're working within a huge brand instead, that's what you should strive to build and embed within the business strategy of the company you're going to be working with. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be challenging because the world we live in today beyond fashion is built around other dynamics that are different from the ones we're talking about here. But that struggle, that conflict, that exiting your comfort zone, that continuous strive to find a balance between what we should have and where we are today, is the only space where we can actually build solutions to evolve and innovate.
So we have questions from the chat. How can we create clothing that are still affordable, also seeing the capitalistic society we live in and the always rising cost of living? So the balance of something that is affordable, but at the end sometimes is more expensive. So the compromise again.
It's a great question, and it touches on two dynamics, I think. The first one I want to stress is, what do we really think is affordable and what do we don't consider affordable? And trust me, I'm not a fan of t-shirts that cost 500 euros just because they're made of the best material in the world. But I'm also not a fan of t-shirts that cost 5 or 10 or even 15 euros because I know that somebody's dying in the supply chain when they cost, that much. So where's the balance? What's the right price? I think a lot of the challenges that responsible designers are taking into them, marketing and communication strategies, is that are too expensive, that the cost of designing in a responsible way is too high. But we also have to ask ourselves the question, maybe we just got used to a cost that is too low and that is not sustainable because simply doesn't factor in the real value of the human and natural resources that are needed to create a t-shirt, a shirt, or a pair of jeans. So this dynamic has to be solved, and this is the first one. The second one, affordability entails the fact that we could have to talk about living wages, and living wages for all, not just in the fashion industry. The fact that today people cannot afford, for example, in Africa and Ghana, and I'm going to use that example precisely because I think it's striking. In Ghana, they were telling me that people cannot afford garments made in Africa anymore because they were just too expensive compared to garments that came from European brands and they were made in other countries of the world. In Italy, people cannot afford made in Italy anymore. So, in the UK, people cannot afford made in the UK anymore. Systemic poverty. If people in whatever job they're doing, they're not paid a living wage, and if the wealth is not very well redistributed, we'll always end up in the same scenario where we'll have to compromise on the environment and make choices that they're probably not a reflection of who we are and our values, whether that is in the food we buy, or what we eat and what we wear and where we sleep and the car that we drive, and so on and so forth. So as you said, I think it's a challenge that transcends the fashion industry. And I think it's a challenge, though, that we have to start embracing, because it is going to be a big one for you entering the industry with your own brand today. How do you solve it? I find that working around the business model today is a solution, where you may have a business model that, for example, for me, blends service and product into the same equation. So some of the marginality that I reduce on the product line, because my products are obviously more expensive, I try to make them more affordable by reducing margins on product and working on other deliverables, such as services, consultancy, or whatever it may be, that I can put back into the company so that I can balance that at the end of the year in the bottom line. I decrease the margin of the product, I increase margins on something else. So I work around this fusion of service and product until I reach equilibrium. Another way for you is not to sell garments, but to sell subscription, for example, to your products. Nudie Jeans does that. They make their products more affordable by not selling you the pair of jeans, but by selling you the possibility to buy into their product, use their products, give it back to the company, and take another product at the end, of your lifetime with a pair of jeans. So it takes, I think, a little bit of a systemic perspective into the matter. You have to put all of the things in the table. What can I offer people? And then you have to find the business model that is best for your product, your target, your audience, and what you want to be in the future.
Thank you, Matteo. So in the last minute, we are not in the print time, but suppose that we are in a place where we are in prime time. Give us a scoop about the next step you have in mind.
Ooh,
disruptive questions.
A scoop. I don't know if I have I'm very transparent. So if you really follow me on like WRÅD on Insta, there's always like things that I'm not supposed to say coming up. There's no scoop. I think today, junk was a big scoop for us. It's like us venturing into the world of media, just like that. I think you'll see more of that in the future. You'll see more of us working to put textile function and exploit the possibility of textile industry in industries that are not primarily focused on textiles. So we're working, for example, that's a scoop, with a brand, I can't name it, who recycles and upcycles iPhones in the same way that we're talking about recycling, upcycling textiles. And we're starting a collab together for something that I'm very excited about for you to see when it will come out.
Thank you so much. Really appreciated and precious, as usual, your input.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity and the time. So I don't know if there's any other questions. I guess if not, I will see you in Milan when I'm back.
It will be a pleasure.
Sweet. Terrific. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao, ciao.